This mini lecture is to teach you the difference between the Columbian Exchange and the Atlantic Circuit. The Atlantic Circuit was a trade network that connected different parts of the Atlantic. The Atlantic Circuit was a trade network just like any other trade network that connected different peoples and different goods and spread wealth and products and languages and religions around those various areas. You've already heard about or studied trade networks like the Silk Road, the Indian Ocean Maritime System, the Chinese making and shipping Uggs to the United States, etc. So the Atlantic Circuit was a trade network that shipped goods from the Americas to Europe, European goods to Africa, and then African slaves from the west coast of Africa to Brazil and to the Caribbean, and a very small number to what is now the United States. What's most important to remember is that the Atlantic Circuit is a trade network. It was ships that were bringing goods from one destination to another, and while there were other things that were exchanged in terms of religion and in terms of ideas, it was specifically a trade network. The Columbian Exchange, on the other hand, is the wide-reaching effects of the interaction between Europeans and Americas that started with Columbus. So the Columbian Exchange is a result of interaction. You know, when you interact with somebody, things get exchanged. Sometimes it's knowledge. Sometimes disease gets exchanged. You all know that about 3 times a year, about a third of the school is missing because you all constantly interact with each other. You sip from each other's drinks. You share each other's food. You lie in each other's laps. You give each other big, long hugs. You're constantly exchanging germs. You're constantly exchanging diseases. And that comes from your interaction. Interaction does not always have to be pleasant either. Interaction can come in fistfights, punches, wars, but it's still interaction, and things get exchanged when you interact, even when it's a negative interaction. The same was true for when the Europeans first interacted with the Americans in the late 15th and early 16th centuries, starting with Columbus. Because of the Columbian Exchange, because of this interaction, Europeans got things that really helped Europe blossom. It helped feed its people with things like tomatoes, potatoes. Europe also got tobacco and corn, all things that Europeans wanted and things that Europeans would benefit from. The Native Americans did get some things from Europe. They got wheat, for example. The Americans also got livestock. They had no animals like cows or horses or sheep or pigs, so that was all something that the Americans got that benefited them. But the Americans also got really gnarly diseases from the Europeans, like smallpox, measles, influenza, yellow fever, typhoid, etc., etc., etc. It actually ended up wiping out 90%, I kid you not, 90% of the Native American population. The Native Americans definitely got the short end of the stick when it came to this interaction specifically. So the final conclusion to draw, I want to make sure you understand the Columbian Exchange is the effects of interaction between the Americans, the Native Americans, and the Europeans once the Europeans started with Columbus. Didn't stop for centuries. They continued to exchange ideas, continued to exchange food items, but it's a much more long-lasting and wide-reaching effects. The Atlantic Circuit was a specific trading network. It traded goods in between between America, the Americas, and Europe and Africa, and then back to the Americas, back to Europe, back to Africa in a triangular trade.